Thank you very much. So good morning, everyone. My name is Lois Varick, and I'm the CEO of Core International. We're a woman-owned management company out of Washington, D.C. I am serving as the chief of party for a project that we're doing for USAID called Enhancing Equality in Energy for Southeast Asia. And our session today is called Financing Inclusive Energy Transition. Our guest speakers are absolutely fantastic. I have the best panel, so you should be happy that you're here in the room. We have speakers from IFC, ADB, PLN from Indonesia, Citron Power from Thailand, and we'll be also hearing about CIP, the Climate Investment Funds. So the logos. Our session agenda is on this slide, and that is going to be the lineup for our speakers. We're going to try very hard to do 10 minutes per person and have a 15 to 20-minute question and answer at the end of our session. So setting the scene a little bit for today. Today's the third day of the Asia Clean Energy Forum, premier annual event for people like us to knowledge share, forge partnerships, build networks, and do what we can to accelerate the just energy transition. The rapidly transitioning energy sector from a fossil energy-based sector to a clean energy-based one is going to require a lot of investment in human resources, diversifying our workforce for everything from workers, managers, executives. But also, it provides a tremendous opportunity for women that previously perhaps was not there. It's a little dry in here. It's a little stuffy. So let me say, 2 days ago was my birthday. Thank you very much. But that's not the date that I wanted to mention, most importantly today. The date I wanted to mention was October 25, 1988. Does anybody know what that day was? So that day in the United States was the day that our US Congress passed a bill called HR 5050. And it was the first time that banks in the United States were allowed to lend money to women entrepreneurs or business owners without a male signature. Right? So to put it in perspective a little bit, I think, okay, just so you know, I was 23 at the time. Please don't do the math. But if you think about it, Bill Gates, founder of Microsoft, who's much older than me, thank you, he was 19 when he founded Microsoft. And I'm quite sure he did not need a female signature in order to get his business started. So we want to think back and say, you know, what would the world be like right now if we didn't have those barriers? So we're going to be talking about that today in terms of what can we do now to make sure that women are part of this clean energy transition. So. Heading to Samoa. Okay. Oh, thank you. So I'm going to do a little throwback. I used to be a senior country manager for Africa and the Middle East for the U.S. Trade and Development Agency. And our work there included packaging projects for potential financing by these great institutions here. So I just want to go through a little bit about what is the project life cycle, which we all know, but just to hit on it a little bit. We start with a need and an opportunity. Then we go to confirming that the feasibility of the project is correct and that it can be done. We look for proven technologies to implement. Then we go forward and make sure there's community acceptance. We heard a lot about that yesterday. And then we have the licensing and regulatory compliance issues. If anyone listened yesterday to Thomas Owen, it was the 300 signatures required for some renewable energy programs. And then, of course, we come to the most important thing, which is financing. And how do we package those projects? Can they be strictly commercial? Do we have blended financing? How can we make them work? So we know that there's a lot of opportunities for women. We know there's also a lot of challenges for women. And we know that the most important thing that we can do right now with our goals for 2030 for clean energy is to make sure that we have replication and scale. So for today, it's great. We have the opportunity to have our speakers talk to us about what specific challenges are there in this marketplace to get to those 2030 goals. What can be done by the financial institutions, governments, companies, NGOs, special funds to actually help make that replication and scale happen. So of course, we're turning that over to our panel. And I'd like to start, if I may, with Nina Kolobanschinka. I'll let you, Nina, if you would come up. Nina is a senior social development specialist at the Climate Investment Funds, an enabler, pioneer climate smart climate planning and action in low and middle income economies. The Climate Investment Fund, CIF, provides a large scale, low cost, and long-term financial solutions to support countries to achieve their climate goals. Nina's work focuses on gender equality and social inclusion with a focus on community participation. Nina has over 20 years of experience in development, having worked in the World Bank, several UN agencies, as well as civil society organizations and academia. And she will speak to us about gender equality and social inclusion in CIF program. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you so much. It is really a great honor to be presenting here and being the first speaker on such a distinguished panel. We have a lot of amazing presentations coming up. I have prepared more slides than I have minutes allocated for the presentation, but luckily Luis took care a little bit of my first slide. Oh, sorry. We did do a practice run on the clicker, but obviously needed more time to do that. So I know that there are in the audience quite a few friends of CIF, but just very quickly, half a minute pitch. We were established in 2008. Our current budget is over 11 billion. And we also are very proud to say that the leverage factor, so with the money that we put on the table, there is 9 times more than the MDBs and the private sector are bringing into the projects. The projects we don't implement projects, we give finance to the multilateral development banks, to the World Bank Group, as well as the 4 regional development banks. And the signature part of our business model is really a country level approach. So when we start a program, when we start engaging, and we have programs both in adaptation and mitigation, we invite all the MDB partners to work together with the government counterparts to come up with the investment plan, country investment plan. So a series of projects that will be financed by different institutions over time, and how they all come together to address a single challenge. Also in all our projects, we take social inclusion considerations and co-benefits very seriously. It is part of our approach. And part of our work, obviously, our main responsibility is providing finance, but we also pride ourselves on being a learning laboratory where we come up with cutting edge knowledge, come up with ideas, solutions that then we encourage our MDB partners to really push boundaries in certain areas where they would not necessarily be focusing. How do we make sure that all that finance that we're providing is gender inclusive? Well, we have a number of policies and procedures that really allow us to push those requirements. In the slides, I have links to those documents for those who are interested to look a little bit more in detail. In practice, that means that for both at the stage of the investment plan preparation for the country, and then at the next stage when the individual projects are being designed, we have a requirement that each one of those documents should have a gender analysis that identifies the gaps in targeted sectors. And it has to be really sector specific, linked to the project activities. And an example from RE, renewable energy sector would be low rates of women workforce participation. If this is identified as a problem, we want to then see specific gender actions. So what would be the activities within the project that would be designed to remedy the gap identified? And then we also require gender indicators so that in the end, we can really see the impact on what changes were achieved with the help of the project finance. We introduced our gender action plan. So SIF was actually yesterday was SIF had a birthday. We were celebrating 15-year anniversary. And for the Gender Action Program, we are going to be celebrating 10-year anniversary. So it wasn't really from the inception. It took a little bit of time to catch on, but we've been doing the really targeted work. And when in June 2014, we've looked at our projects on those three indicators, analysis, activities, and indicators, we realized that, okay, we're not too bad. Around 50% of the projects had something on that. If we look at only at projects that were approved in our last reporting period in 2020, we see that 100% of projects had women-targeted activities and indicators, and 75 had elaborate analysis, and also our standards for what we would count as analysis have increased over time in order to qualify for that. So over time, we also grew our ambition, as I mentioned, the standards. So in the beginning, our approach was, well, at least we want the projects to be gender informed. We want at least some consideration of gender. And often there were some requirements, like, for example, that there should be consultations with women. Gender targets were usually related to quotas for women, that certain percent of beneficiaries should be women, there should be some training. Then we realized, well, that's not enough because we really have to look at, why access to markets, access to land resources, access to services is different for women. What barriers do they face, and how through those project activities can we really be addressing those barriers? Targeted financing schemes that are looking at women. What are the land tenure rights for women, and if it's used as a condition for funding, whether it acts as a barrier, how are they accessing various services in transport and energy and water, and how that affects their livelihood opportunities. So our analysis got a little bit more sophisticated. Yet we felt that this is still enough and not enough. And in the past 2 years, we've been both as broader SIF, we've been developing some cutting edge knowledge on gender transformative climate finance, how to really push with the limited resources, push transformation. And on gender, we were looking at, how our activities could actually be addressing structural, institutional, and normative barriers to equity, looking at what kind of sectoral reforms could be supported, what kind of actions need to be supported to promote governance, voice, and agency for women. With that, this year, we're just about to publish a knowledge project, which we call a conceptual framework for women climate leadership, trying to look to provide a systematic tool to analyze the barriers, but then also the opportunities that that exist for women to really advance as the leaders in both adaptation and mitigation activities. We aim to publish that within the next 2 weeks, and it also includes a diagnostic questionnaire, a series of questions for sectoral analysis that our colleagues who are designing investment projects should ask themselves when they're looking at gender, to really go beyond just, well, what is the basic that we can do for women, to how can we really shift those structural barriers, both related to agency, to issues that are internalized within women themselves. And we've been discussing a lot of those challenges in the past sessions in this track, but also the enabling environment, what could be done from the top down as well. With that, I had some examples of integration of energy in some of our past renewable energy projects. We have examples of capacity building activities, incentives for electricity companies to employ more women, also incentives for bidding processes favoring candidates that have corporate social responsibility and gender policies, etc. I have one case study that I find interesting about blended finance. So one of our implementing partners, IDB Invest, in the work that it's doing in Latin America, has been using an incentive for the companies. So for those companies that in private sector that are borrowing from ADB, if the company adopts a gender action plan and then implements all the commitments of that plan, they access a reduced loan rate, the loan rate reduced by several percentage points. And, you know, money drives everything. And one of the interesting example with the Bright Distributed Solar Generation project in Mexico, where this incentive was introduced over 5 years ago. So as part of this work, the Gender Action Plan was introduced in a company that operates small-scale solar rooftop power systems. So this was the sector where women were not there at all, only in some very administrative positions, but not in technical or leadership roles. And with a very comprehensive approach and systematic targeting of women, internships, recruitment strategy, working with the universities that have female graduates, bringing those female graduates and then supporting them to stay and progress within the company. Now, 5 years later, over 50% of all core technical and leadership jobs are held by women. So quite a successful change of cultural norms, but also the practices. So now I get to one of our flagship new programs that is particularly relevant to discussion on energy transition is SIP Accelerated Coal Transition Program, or ACT, which is focusing on Indonesia, South Africa, India, and Philippines. And very recently, we also started to do some targeted technical work in North Macedonia and Dominican Republic. And in the first 4 countries, it's really part of the broader JETP conversation. So ACT is considered to be a small component, but also one of the forerunner components of the JETP. And the approach is really to look quite comprehensively and systematically at governance, people and communities and infrastructure, and with an understanding that one cannot succeed without the other, and looking both at the policy level, but then also looking at people, and by people, very often we talk about, you know, male workers that will be laid off from the power plants and coal mines, but looking at it a little bit more holistically at the communities that will be affected up and down the value chain, and then looking at infrastructure, and in all of them finding really entry points for inclusion. We sometimes get a question like, why gender and coal? Like, is there really a link? Because as I've mentioned, the sector is considered to be predominantly male, and there are a number of very specific gender-specific drivers of vulnerability that stem both also at an individual level, but also at the enabling policy environment. And those are the ones that really need to be targeted systematically. And we're looking through the ACT financing to do so. So if we look at the theory of change for ACT, within those 3 pillars, and the first line talks about various type of activities, indicative activities that could be financed through those programs. We match the ACT outcomes. So for the governance, the idea is that the readiness to reduce coal dependence will increase, and then the strategies for coal to clean transition will start to be implemented. But then we have a matching gender outcomes. So we want to ensure that there is increased influence of women-led groups and CSOs and gender lens in all the policies that are being produced. Similarly, for the people component, which personally I find to be the most important, and I think a lot of the stakeholders agree, and it does need to come ahead of the technical part as well. The focus on income, skills, and livelihoods should extend between those directly the workers who will be laid off to the communities, to the future affected employees and communities, and again, how gender equality could be achieved in that. And even in the infrastructure part, there are specific entry points for social inclusion, related to increasing the share of socially responsible enterprises and enterprises led by women or other marginalized groups that are participating in all those activities related to reclamation and repurposing. And since I ran out of time, just my last 2 slides. So to target that, in addition to the financing, which already has gender requirements as all our financing does, we have a small grant mechanism that is currently funded by Canada. We're trying to mobilize more resources. And the purpose is to foster women climate leadership in an effective participation in the design and implementation of coal to clean transition strategies. So we really want to bring those women to the decision-making tables and then let them run with some of the implementation solutions themselves as well. The picture is from my recent trip to South Africa. You could see how excited I am meeting with the local women in one of the municipalities that is already being affected by the coal plant closure and the job loss. The idea is, and what we're discussing in South Africa is creation of women-led coalitions. So working on two levels, the downstream support, so supporting, galvanizing women at the local level to come together and to implement certain activities that are most addressing their most urgent priorities related to transition. But at the same time, also focusing on an upstream support. So how to translate those voices and those local needs in the language that can be understood by the national policymakers and decision makers, and how to create the dialogue. So this is our vision. We're still in the very early stages with Volkot, figuring it out, a little bit more advanced conversation on Indonesia, very much looking for partners, ideas, and further inspiration on that. Thank you so much.
That was terrific. That was terrific, Nina. And it's absolutely impossible to do this in 10 minutes. I assure you, and it's perfectly fine. So our next speaker is actually from Thailand, and it's the head of Citron Power. This is Praparat Kangatwatana. Did I do okay? And she's founder and CEO. And she's also founder of Norris Group of Companies. She is a trailblazer in the solar PV industry in Thailand as the first female owner of an EPC company. Citron is in the top 5 of Thailand's solar installers and has 150 megawatts of cumulatively installed capacity. It was listed on Live Exchange in 2022. And it has a current paid up capital of approximately 15 million. She'll be speaking to us about her life journey and how, as a woman entrepreneur, she developed an EPC startup in Thailand, which of course is a very male-dominated industry. Thank you very much.
Good morning. Thank you, Lois, for a very, very nice introduction. And also, for the title of this presentation, I have to give credit to Peter DuPont because I just came up with the presentation without title. So it's very nice title, Empowering Women, How a Woman Entrepreneur Develop into EPC Startup in the Thailand Male-Dominated Solar PV Industry. Male-dominated, just not only solar, I would say that in Thailand.
That's true.
Okay, Citron Power, actually the name just came after I set up the company called Northeast Energy. It was set up in year 2012. So it's aimed to be a consultant and develop a solar power plant in Thailand. But then we are very small. We were very small at that time and we cannot, outbid any successful developer at that time. So I set up another company called Citron Power, which is Northeast spelled backward as a Citron Power. So that's the story of how I come up with the name. All right. So you don't have to guess my age. So I just, give you a clear picture of how I become today and how we develop ourselves to be a Citron Power today. So I start my career in year 19, actually it's 1993 after the graduate. And then I was an analyst for several houses in Thailand. Started with the Wally James Capel, which was the first foreign security equity-based research house in Thailand. And then it's consolidated and changed to HSBC Security and then BNP Paribas. So I got a very good opportunity to, to do the research about energy sector in Thailand. At that time, it was only about coal industry. So I got opportunity to travel to Indonesia to do the BNP at that time. They was the consultant in selling asset of coal mining to Thai corporate. So I was invited to join the team. So it was very good experience. Also, I got opportunity to travel to China to do the M&A for Thai corporate in coal mine in China. So it's not a good place to talk about coal mine, right? So I've been with the fossil fuel in power plant for a while, and then I got opportunity to do to join the investment banking team for hotel and food business. It's called Minor Group at that time. It's after tsunami in year 2004, and the company got into cash trap issue. They cannot make money from their hospitality business. So we advised them to consolidate the food business, which was the huge cash flow company, into the hotel and change it into Minor International. At that time, Minor market cap was even less than 200. I think it's less than 200 million US, but today it's like billions-dollar company in Thailand, become the largest conglomerate of hotel in Asia, I would say. So I was with Minor doing M&A, doing corporate restructure, capital raise, and also issue a lot of warrants at that time to cover and support for the expansion. So come back to my energy analyst instinct. When the Thai government announced the first concession of renewable power in Thailand, I was asked to join the company that newly set up, and they would like to have someone who be able to do the finance part. So I become the CFO. The company called Thai Solar Energy. The company was granted around 80 megawatts of solar power plant under the scheme called BSPP in Thailand. So I've been working with the company for 5 years until all the concession finished. So I was suggested by a lot of my friends that why don't you just set up your own company? You have been raising capital for a lot in the past. So I listened to him. But today I just talked to myself, I shouldn't listen to him at all. So that's become the Northeast and Citron Power today. So I set up Citron Power. Long story short, I set up Citron Power because we cannot get any solar power plant project at all. And I end up with 5 people in my team, 2 are engineers, me, myself, and my CFO, and the maid of the company. So I just look around and what I'm gonna do with my people. So I talked to my friend, hey, you suggest me to be in the business, help me out here. So he has a small factory in Bangkok. So he said, why don't you install solar roof in my factory? I give you a job. This was like less than 200 kilowatt at that time. So we do that. We did successfully, but we end up in red because it's first project. We had no idea how to begin with, but we successfully install, and they're happy with it. So after the first project, despite it's in red, I can expand more. Friends' words, by gets word of mouth, and then I get more project in the next year. We get like 5 mega, the next year 10, and time flies. From year 2016 to last year 2022. Last year I finished installing in 1 year nearly 50 megawatt.
How did you finance it?
Look at look at how I smile. Actually, it's not smile. It's just a painful smiling. It is construction business. I have to recruit, the construction team. I have to deal with all engineers, high ego male. Sorry about the gentleman. And I just talked to lawyers the other day that I never be able to compete them in the conversation, in the discussion. During the meeting, they just bluff me that I have no idea about the business. So this is the story that why it is a big challenge for Citron to be an EPC company in Thailand. We are new, we are small. I am nobody. I didn't have the last name. I'm not even an engineer. And bottom line is, I'm just a woman developing in EPC company. So look at what we have done. Last year, it was an opportunity from the stock exchange in Thailand. They just opened a new SME board, SME exchange. The reason that I joined this exchange because they give out the grant, the very like good funding of around 3 million baht. For me, it's very big number. So we got grant to prepare for auditing team, prepare for accountant, prepare for legal, prepare for ERP system. So this is another step that we plan to be listed in MAI, which is the secondary market in Thailand within next year. Actually, the filing will happening in a few months from now. So this is another story that Citron will put up. Thank you. That's the first slide, and then run out of time already.
Maybe if you could talk about the challenges you have finance, help us.
Okay. I don't know how I can finish in one minute from now from the rest of my slides. But then I don't think I need to go through all the slides. So you can see this is the one-page banner that the company has done in the last year when we filed for live exchange. We have done not only rooftop, we have done the open water floating solar, by the PTT oil tank in the offshore in Thailand. I think we are only one that did that last year. And the largest scale rooftop in Thailand in one site we have done is 7 megawatt. Okay. The hardest part in Thailand was not EPC construction or engineering. The hardest part is the permit application. So you have to go to at least the smallest one, you have to go through at least 4 permits. The largest one, you have to go through as nearly as 7 permits. And the thing is that they don't work together. Each party, each authority. Actually, the next authority was talking next door. So, so every time I was on the speaker panel, if there were any authority in the audience, I would say something to them. But then I assume that there's no one here. So in Thailand, it's just like that. And as I mentioned, we are very small with nobody. When we go to this kind of authority, we don't get a privilege. We have to go by orders. And that's a pain in my business. Okay. And the next level, I think I don't need to go through everything, but then if you can look later on in the website, you can see that number of employee in my company, the structure is male engineer was around 80%. And the rest is me and my CFO. But luckily, the CEO is the woman. So I have the say for everything. I have the say for everything in the company. And just talking to Lois that the reason that I like to be listed in MAI, I think that It's a turning point of the company. I want the company to be heard. I want to maintain our talent, not just only the money, because we grow the company with or without the capital raise in the stock exchange. But we like to maintain the talents. We would like to attract the new one. So from the last 5 years that I have done, we train a lot of new grads just to find out later, 2 years later, that they leave us for the big corporate because they are already trained. This is a sad thing that happened. So if I be able to maintain the talents, that cost structure that I'm looking for will be much improved significantly. So I'll just ask anyone who be able to, to help out the small company like Citron to grow and be able to play a big part as a woman-led EPC company in Thailand. Please do so. Thank you.
I don't know, my vision is 20 years from now, it's going to be the Propfrat conglomerate of companies, Thailand, right? Our next speaker, and thank you very much, Propfrat, that was great. And we have Kadidia Kanare, who is IFC's Asia Pacific Capital Markets Lead for Infrastructure, where she secures financing for renewable energy projects from both Bangkok and Washington. She was formerly an Agile Fellow for the World Bank's CEO Strategic Initiative Unit, a former special advisor to the president of Mali, a member of the African Leadership Network, and co-founder of the Impact Hub Bamako, an innovative and incubator lab for African youth. She holds an MA in Public Administration and International Development from Harvard Kennedy School, and is an MA in Agricultural Economics and a BA in Accounting from Michigan State University. Wow. She's going to speak to us about women's participation for a just and inclusive energy transition.
Thank you. Thank you, Lois. Good morning, everyone. To get a sense, how many of you are familiar with IFC? Okay, good. And enough people so that I can jump through the part covering IFC. So my presentation is about women's participation in the energy transition. So before I do that, at least I have to talk about my company. And hopefully in the audience, there are people who are thinking of, you have idea of starting their own company, or who are like trying to scale their company or grow. So we are the shop, right? So IFC is the private sector arm of the World Bank Group. We lend to the private sector. Unlike the World Bank deals with government. So we have a separate balance sheet to help you for a matter of comparison with ADB. ADB has one balance sheet, so they use that for the public and the private. We do have a separate balance sheet from the World Bank. So what we do, we do investment. I'm part of the investment department where we give loans, equity. We do different type of product and blended finance. So with my co-panelist Sif, we get money, and we get money from many donors to help de-risk a lot of the projects we get involved in. Then you have upstream. So the upstream, it's really something new that we just started because in the infrastructure space, we found out that it takes a lot of time to develop the project, and they need resources at the beginning. So we wanted to be there to help people from at the very early stage of their project development. And then we have the advisory department. They help. They usually tend to work with government and help them structure the different infrastructure projects so that we can help mobilize the private sector. So we help also mobilizing funding from other developmental financial institutions, such as ADB. We do a lot of work with them, and then we work with other regional development banks as well. So we raised about 10 billion last year from other investors to help us deliver our program. So I think I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this one. So these are the different products that we do. Besides giving money, we really help. We can get involved with the company very early on, help them with their strategy, design, transaction support, implementation, and gender is really in our DNA. When I started working for the World Bank 16 years ago, it was merely like a ticking box exercise for us, but this is really it's part of our DNA, because if you look at the gender diversity and inclusion, we look at it. Any project we get involved at the advisory side or investment side, we have 5 boxes we look at. We look at how many women are on the leadership team, on board, and then we look at the employment of women in the project. And then the third one is we look at how many women SMEs are given opportunities to participate in the project. And then we also look at them as consumers. How many of these women will be consumer to the project we are developing? And the last bucket is the community. How close, the community is close to the project will benefit from those projects, especially the women in those communities. So this is really a rigorous exercise we do on every advisory project. We are doing extremely well there, but on the investment side, I must admit we are lacking. We are lagging because we come after the project preparation sometimes, and it depends on the sponsors if they really would like us to help them on that front. Yep. So commitment. So since we have been established 1956, we've been doing 285 billions of investment. So we are AAA rated. So that means our cost of capital is very low. Then we can help, and then we can work in a lot of the developing countries. So this to give you a little bit of some of the numbers we've done in 2022. So you can see we are growing in Africa. When I started, we were like, Africa was like 5%, right? And today we are doing a little bit more in Africa. Asia is shrinking, definitely. But we are focusing on a different tranche in Asia. So on own account, we are about 64 billion. So new commitment was 13 billion from our own account. And then, like I say, we mobilize, and then we work in 120 countries. And then we have a numerous number of clients. Yeah, we are in many countries. So we really have, we are global local. So we focus a lot on the local. We spend a lot of time saying we bring the global knowledge for local approach. So I don't have enough time, so I know I don't want to rush, but I want us to catch up a little bit on the time. So I'll go into my presentation, which is really how can we bring more women into the infrastructure sector. So for this click. Yeah. So for energy transition, Irina says that we need about $35 trillion by 2030 to make energy transition a reality. So that tells you, if you do a little bit of math, how much we will be needing every year between now and then, right? So for that to scale up renewable energy, we'll need a lot of labor force, And then you cannot really forget about 50% of the planet, the people on the planet, right, which are women. So we need to bring more women and find a way to engage them and support them so that they can deliver. And we can see from Kun Prapart, who is a Citron, so players like her needs help, and we dare to support them. So you can see she was mentioning the lack of talent. About 32% of the women account for the workforce in the energy sector. Renewable actually is doing much better than the oil and gas. So we have a lot of work to do there, and women tend to be in the administrative job. Even there, the numbers don't add up much, right? So we need to do more. And then I don't have to spend too much time on talking about the benefit of having women on and working in companies. We know that companies that brings on women are more innovative, tend to be resilient, and the women are very careful, diligent. I'm not bashing on any man, but and that has been shown, and this is shown in many of the profitabilities of the companies, right? So, and how do we partner? I mean, we are always looking for partners in IFC. So if you are in the room, you are a private sector player, please reach out to us, right? In terms of, we do partnership around jobs at all level of our partners companies. Leadership position. We have the private capital and the know-how, so we're happy to share our knowledge. And then of course the entrepreneurs, whom are like every big companies that you see today, they started small, right? So that's why we are here, and we would like to support some people. Sometimes people get afraid when they hear the name IFC. They think, oh, we only support big players. But we do actually also work with small ones, right? And we have been doing a lot of effort, I think, with ADB, with other banks, commercial banks, private companies, to try to bring the women together, because we noticed that if the women are in isolations, they tend to get discouraged. And so we thought bringing them together, sharing their knowledge, their experience, can motivate them to continue and be an active player in the sector. So we have set up the We Power, which is the South Asian women in the power sector. We have done the same thing in Africa. So you see a lot of emergence of those type of networking clubs around the power sector. So I just wanted to give some numbers. So if you look at IFC in terms of big investment, when we do invest, so for every dollar we lend, we mobilize, like, it's 1 to 2, right? But actually there is a fantastic initiative in the World Bank Group called the We Finance, Women Entrepreneurs Finance Initiative. So that funds is about 350 million, but it has been 1 for 10. So that money, 356 million, they've been able to leverage that to more than $3.5 billion. So that tells you that actually, women's led companies, SMEs can be, if we lend to them, it can be more impactful. So you can see the gap, that 3 billion is just a drop in the bucket, because the need there is 1.7 trillion, right? And then you can see there are many legal constraints, 115. Who would you believe that today 115 countries in women still face many legal constraints in terms of trying to run their own business. So one thing that I really like is the impact, right? Women, so you have 25%, women are 25% less likely than men to start a business. And then profit, we tend to be more conservative in terms of our vision of growth for our companies. So all of that needs to change. For that to change, we need to support the women entrepreneurs, especially in particular in the clean tech sector. So, I mean, the women, you saw the different challenges faced by the women in entrepreneurship in general. But when we come to clean tech, it's even worse, right? Because you have the gender stereotype, and on top of that, then women tend to be too humble and downplay our achievement, because I think what Kun Prapar did is fantastic. It needs to be applauded. It needs to be supported. But we're not as aggressive as men are, right? So this is why we need to support players like Kun. We had to do that. I remember the first project we did in the solar in Thailand was with Kun Wendy. This was 2008 when she was awarded 34 project of 6 megawatt. Nobody wanted to talk to her. She came to us. We were like, this is too small for us, but we thought was a very important project to be involved in. So we made the decision to invest at that point $1.7 million. Nobody has heard of it. It was so small. It was a challenge to get anybody in the organization to actually work on those projects. But we did it because we thought it was important to signal the market that we want to support women entrepreneurs. So because of that 1.7 million equity investment, we were able to K-Bank, Kasikorn Bank came along with us, provided them with 12 million. And then subsequently, we gave more equity and we've done more. And today, our company is valued about $400 million, right? So, and she is one of the pioneers. So hopefully, we see you there soon. And so again, we need to build a gender diverse entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I don't believe in like silos, women here, men here. I think we really need to bring them together, right? So encouraging men in the clean tech sector to mentor women and vice versa. So they exchange notes and help each other to grow. If we don't do that, it's not gonna, we're not gonna get there, right? Because it's infrastructure is a much longer lead times in terms of project development. You cannot develop in 3 months, right? Like she was talking about, a lot of permitting, a lot of dealing with government. So they need support, they need to be encouraged, a lot of knowledge sharing. So we are there as partner and we want to make it happen. So again, we are here. Come to us if you have the idea or creating opportunities, like we said, early stage project development. We can help. If you are at the capital raising phase of your project, we can be there. Ideation. So if you are the idea and you're very small, you don't have any capital, we tend to direct you to our partners who are running incubators. So you can go there, they can help you with the ideations and everything. And then when you reach a little bit of a scale, then we are partnering also with commercial banks who can help you, lend to you so that you achieve a certain number of growth, then you can come to us, right? But we come, don't hesitate, knock at our door, and then we're happy to guide you and direct you to the right and appropriate opportunities. Sorry, I've been too long, but I thought it was important to make a point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Khadija. Absolutely fantastic. So our next speaker is from our host entity, ADB. It's Kate Hughes. She's a senior climate change specialist. She has 18 years of experience in climate change and sustainable development throughout Asia. And she's presently leading the development of ADB's Just Transition Agenda. which focuses on supporting countries to manage their just transition across all sectors. She holds a BA and an MA in engineering with specialization in energy policy and planning. And her discussion will be on the just transition to net zero. Thank you.
Thank you and good morning. It's really, I guess, just a shout out at first to have a special gender track at ACEF. I think it's really important. I have a very personal connection to it. I was one of 2 females in my aeronautical engineering degree and the first oil and gas pipeline graduate engineer when I started as an engineer. I now do climate change, which is over the other side, but I think it's really positive to see events like this and particularly to see men in the audience of events like this. So thank you for coming to listen. So today I'm going to talk about ADB's Just Transition agenda. I know we're a bit pressed for time, so I'll go through this quite quickly, but happy to have a longer chat with anyone after the event. Just Transition is really an integral part of ADB's climate agenda. I'm sure over the last few days, you've already heard quite a bit on ADB's climate targets, but particularly our increased climate finance ambition of 100 billion cannot be done unless Just Transition is an integral part of that. So we need to ensure that it's a core part of how we approach all of our climate change work and all of our climate finance mobilization. I think this thing works. I practiced. Okay. Okay. We've got to go back. Right. So the Just Transition concept, I think there's a lot of you may be familiar at a conceptual level on what Just Transition is, but really at its very core, we need whole economic and societal transformations to get to net zero. We need to move away from fossil fuels to green activities. So as a result of that, there's going to be a lot of socioeconomic impacts that need to be taken account. And a Just Transition is about making sure that we anticipate and manage those impacts. But at the same time, and what's really important for ADB is that it's an opportunity agenda. So it's not about risk mitigation and coming in at the end and cleaning up the impacts, but about seeing ahead what type of opportunities we can see for economic diversification, for creation of greener jobs, for upskilling our workforces, for new supply chains for countries, new opportunities. So that's a core part of how we see Just Transition at ADB. So aligned with that, the focus then needs to be on enabling interventions. We need to think about what types of early interventions can come in to create the right enabling conditions to support a just transition. Implementation of Just Transition needs to be really context specific, and that includes country level, but also within countries in terms of regional variance across economies and societies. Just very quickly, this is a good way to visualize Just Transition. This is part of a report I contributed to with the Grantham Institute. Across the top, you can see the 3 priority actions for Just Transition. So one is anticipating, assessing, and addressing the social risks of transition. So understanding what those risks might be, upstream analytics to assess what those potential level of impacts are, and really helping to plan around those risks. The second is identifying and enabling those social opportunities of transition, as I was saying. And the third, which is a really core part, is ensuring meaningful dialogue and participation in net zero planning. There's a lot of discussion around stakeholder consultation and stakeholder engagement as part of Just Transition, but it's really about integrated cooperative planning, not just consultation. And then across the 4 columns, you can see a good way to think about the 4 groups of potentially impacted people that need to be considered. So workers, which is the obvious place that people go first with Just Transition, thinking about jobs and workers. But fanning out from that we need to go from thinking about direct impacts to also thinking about indirect and potential induced impacts. And that includes through supply chains, through communities, and even through consumers and how their choices and availability of products and lifestyle will change. Is that going to work? Okay. So ADB has made some commitments on just transition as a kind of anchor of our agenda. So just before COP26 in Glasgow, we joined with other MDBs to commit to 5 high-level principles for just transition. Our 2021 energy policy also commits ADB to support a just energy transition as part of our energy operations. Another core part of the agenda, and obviously the focus for today, is that integration of gender aspects into just transition. And so I think it's important to look at ADB's commitments on gender equality and gender mainstreaming alongside our commitments on climate and our commitments on just transition, because it really is an integrated agenda. We're currently working on developing ADB's institutional approach for just transition. So we've established a just transition working group across the bank, which has representatives from all departments. And so we're currently working out how ADB as an institution operationalizes the concept of just transition in operations. So I think just, one of the, okay. One of the core parts of just transition I was saying is that we need to think of it as an integrated part of the agenda. It's not going to be effective if we have climate action, net zero planning, support for countries on transition, and then a just transition agenda here. And so one of the core parts of work we're doing is looking at how to integrate it into our support around the broader enabling environment for climate investments. So when we look at that enabling environment for increased climate finance flows to countries, we look at these 4 pillars. And for just transition, you can see that it intersects and touches on aspects of all these 4 pillars. So in terms of national context, understanding demographics, understanding the political context, understanding the development aspirations of the country. What are its economic growth aspirations? What type of economic diversification plans, industrial plans does the country have? Similarly, on the policy environment, there's all the climate change policies, but then there's other critical policies that come in when you think about just transition. So industrial policy, economic policy, labor policy, education policy, sector development policy, and timeframes. A lot of policy is shorter term policy, so thinking out to 2040, 2050, and thinking about the longer term policy commitments. Similarly, the institutional environment's really critical. You'll find in a lot of the discussions, including the current ones for JETP, for energy transition, you'll have the ministries of economy, ministries of finance, Ministry of Energy in the room, but the social ministries, labor ministries, education ministries are not necessarily there in the same discussion. And we have a lot of discussion on just energy transition or inclusive energy transition, and we haven't necessarily got the right institutional players in the conversation. So looking at that cross-ministerial coordination is a really key part for just transition. And then the financial system. We know we want to increase climate investments and we want to increase investments that support a just transition. There's a lot of work on financial system reform, but that reform agenda is not necessarily connected again to a just transition or a social agenda. So how do we bring aspects of just transition into financial system reform? One of the things around just transition is how we're going to pay for it. So I think on a conceptual level, everybody agrees with it. Everybody says, yes, we need an inclusive transition. I've lost my slides now. Anyway, we need an inclusive transition. We need to, we need to include just transition aspects, but actually who's going to pay for it? And I think we need to have slightly different considerations around just transition financing than we need about climate finance. So I think one of the critical things about just transition is the timing of when the finance flows. So going back to what I was saying at the beginning about it being an enabling agenda, if we're looking at aspects like, skilling workforce, economic diversification, strengthening supply chains, that investment actually needs to come ahead of decarbonisation activities. So the just transition financing following that chain of thought needs to come and be available ahead. So when governments are thinking about sequencing budget, or development partners are thinking about strategic planning to net zero, the timing of when the just transition finance is going to flow is really critical. I think the other aspect of just transition finance that needs to be considered is that government budgets are going to be impacted. So governments may be losing revenue from moving away from fossil fuels, from reduced fossil fuel exports, from early retirement of coal-fired power stations. So they'll have fiscal pressure from that. At the same time that potentially they'll have pressure from increased social protection requirements, increased unemployment. So at a national level, how do governments balance that? In time, so I'll be quick. I think for ADB, what is really important is to think about different types of finance. So one is, how do we integrate just transition into everything that we do? So how do we take the concept of just transition and make sure it's integrated into operations? But the second type of finance that's really important for ADB is, how do we align our social sector operations with the climate agenda and with the net zero planning? So we already have lending in education, in health, we already have expertise in social protection. How do we make sure that that work is aligned with the work that's going on in countries on the climate agenda? And that's a really powerful aspect of just transition, because it gives an opportunity to bring non-climate finance into the climate finance space. Very quickly, so last year, ADB, we launched a technical assistance platform for just transition at COP. We launched with an initial 2 million so that we can get it going, because there's a lot of demand for technical support. But we are raising money to increase that platform by the end of this year, and then look to develop a specific just transition funding vehicle to meet that funding gap on who's going to pay for some of those just transition aspects. So at the moment, we're doing a lot of upstream work in terms of analytical work on socioeconomic impact assessment, on things like stakeholder engagement, economic diversification analysis, supporting countries on policy processes, on how they can operationalize just transition, and looking at how we can mainstream just transition into ADB operations. I have one specific example. The energy transition mechanism that you may have heard about this week. So it's a flagship project of ADB. It's a financial mechanism for the early retirement of coal-fired power stations. And so just transition is a really core part of that. And this diagram just shows, I think, the complexity when we say just transition is a core part. So at the asset level, which is where people immediately think, then we have those direct impacts around workers, communities, suppliers, contractors at the asset level. But if we're really looking at a systematic and scaled up closure of coal-fired power stations in a country, and Indonesia is one of the countries that we're quite far ahead, then we need to look out from that asset level and start thinking about those indirect and induced impacts, mapping along the full coal supply chain, understanding impacts on government budget, understanding more structural changes to the workforce that might occur. So we're doing that work in Indonesia. And my very last slide is gender-specific considerations. So I've done a bad job of mentioning gender so far in the time. However, I did want to give a specific example. So my colleague Zoni's in the room. She's from our gender team, and she works with me very closely on the just transition aspects. One of the pieces of work we're doing in Indonesia is the socioeconomic impact assessment. And it's looking at a short list of 10 plants and what would be those socioeconomic impacts if you retired those coal-fired power stations. So as a key part of that, we really wanted to look at differentiated impacts on women. And therefore, when we design mitigation measures and help the government to design mitigation measures, how we can take gender-specific considerations. And so for that, we did the socioeconomic impact assessment, looking at, impacts on employment, government revenue, aggregated income loss in the economy. But then we also overlaid onto that a vulnerability index. So we looked at gender-based violence, we looked at levels of female employment, and we looked at indicators for entrenched poverty in different regions in Indonesia. And so by overlaying that territorial gender vulnerability index, we were able to see how those socioeconomic impacts may be different for women in different things. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
That is very interesting. That is a holistic approach and very needed. So if I just take a second to see where we are, we had an investment fund, we had ADB Bank, we have IFC, we had a woman-owned entrepreneur out of Thailand, and now we have our rock star. So I've had the pleasure of being on several panels with Cynthia Roseley. She's Executive Vice President of Corporate Finance at PLN, which almost everybody knows is a state-owned company that operates the electricity sector in Indonesia. And I looked that up. I said, the electricity sector in Indonesia, 17,000 islands and so many people. And yes, the electricity sector. She's worked at PLN for 20 years. And just bear with me 1 second. I have to say just a few things about her. Cynthia was the chairwoman and CEO of the Indonesian Exim Bank and CEO of Indonesia Infrastructure Guarantee Fund. She was formerly the head of the Energy Market Reform Working Group for the Indonesia National Committee, World Energy Council from 2005 to 6. She's presently the chief of Srikandi PLN, which is a task force within the company that aims to ensure the implementation of women empowerment programs at PLN. She's also a member of the Board of Commissioners for Indonesia Battery Corporation and an advisory board member of the Global Power System Transformation GPST Consortium. She holds an MA in Management from IPMI Business School and an MBA from Monash University, Australia, a Master in Engineering Science and Power Systems, University of New South Wales, Australia, and a BA in Electrical Engineering from the University of Indonesia. Wow, another wow. So she is going to be talking to us about gender mainstreaming in power system for a power system operator, which is the PLN context. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Lois. That was a very generous introduction. So very good morning. I would like to explain a bit about the power system operator context. We've been hearing some interesting presentations in terms of the policy, the framework, and also some of the examples in Thailand's, I think women-led SME, I would say. A very interesting case, but in Indonesia, I think we may need to look into what's happening around the energy transitions, because I think in the global platform now, Indonesia is the topic or the talk of the town, because we are now having around 60+% productions from coal, and we are being now getting some assistance from the IPG, from the GFANS, now ADB, World Bank, and all others are now working together hand in hand on how to ensure that the decarbonization roadmap for Indonesia can be successful, and how the just transition aspect would be materialized. So this is quite a long journey, and we are now working very closely and very intensively. And in fact, today we have a workshop in Jakarta with the JETP to look into the whole, result for the last few months, that we will look into the energy transitions and how the various aspect needs to be pushed down the road. So today, I think on today's contact, I think I hope that everyone knows PLN already. So we are basically the state-owned corporations, a monopoly that we are covering the the whole country, 17,000 islands, 270 million people, and we have a customers of 86 million now. So we are the biggest utility in the world that have the biggest customers in the world. And the assets is around 100 billion US dollars, and installed capacity is around 69, and employee is around 51.5 thousand employees. And basically, currently, this is one of the things that I've just mentioned. This is now being scrutinized together with the International Energy Agency. So we will have a kind of scenario that would be something workable for a country to be executed, and some support from the public finance as well as the private finance, and the help from the multilaterals and development finance institution could look into the plan, which is kind of validated by the International Energy Agency. So currently, just for everyone's understand that the JETP is very good now in terms of the context, the framework. We have 4 streams: the policy streams, the system planning streams, and the technical streams, and the finance stream, as well as the just transition streams. The policy streams led by the World Bank, the technical streams led by the IEA, and the finance streams led by ADB, and the just transition team led by the UNDP, I think with the help of the multilaterals as well. So based on this, our current existing plan, we have an additional plan to ensure that we are able to achieve some of the aspirations of the JETP and some of the aspirations of the global community, to ensure that Indonesia can contribute to the not only national determined contributions as being committed, but also some additionalities on top of that. So there are kind of accelerated programs that needs to be done, and all of this individual clusters of investments are needed some fundings from various institutions, financial institutions. So I think with that, I would also like to share some of the, in terms of the context today, we have a few projects that needs to be financed. And along with this, we have been also preparing institutional, internal capability and framework. And thanks to the USA, thanks to ADB, World Bank, and some other, our partners that help us also develop a financing framework, sustainability financing framework, green financing framework. And we've basically have been ready 2 years ago to launch the first green bonds that has got the second party opinion already, but just the market is not on our side, so we postponed that. And currently we are working on the sustainability linked financing framework. But a part of this, we also have a various loan from DFIs and multilaterals, which link to the what we call the DLI for sustainability on the ESG. We call it the result-based lending or performance for result with the World Bank, for example. So basically, PLN has been working on this for quite some time. And I think for today's discussion, the just transition aspect is something that we need to push more, because it is something that not, I would say it's a new concept, but we need a new push, because there is
assessment is ongoing. There is no need to evaluate. Normal activities can continue.
okay, earthquake.
HQ experience a minor tremor a short time.
All right.
Building assessment is ongoing. There is no need to evacuate. Normal activities can continue.
Okay, we should continue in prayer. Let's do that in our hearts. Hope nothing happened. Seriously. So I have 3 minutes more while praying and presenting. That's quite a challenge. Okay. Oh, yeah, okay. Okay. So this is a test for the women leaders, just to stay calm in the very pressing situation. Okay, so then go back to the ESG aspect, that when we talk about the financing any investment, you know, more and more pressure comes to us. For example, now in the current time, that ESG is something that is very, very critical, not only from the multilateral or bilateral banks, but also investors, bondholders. They are very, very serious and concerned about the plan of this ESG, specifically probably on the social aspect when we talk about today on the gender issues. It's been becoming a disbursement target, and also for PLN internally, we have a serious effort internally to push this in terms of policy, in terms of framework, and also in daily operations to monitor the target and action points. I probably sometimes we can discuss that we have more than 300 initiatives in the whole corporates to look into the ESG aspect. And I think this, shows from various aspects. Commitment from the BOD is very, very strong. And policy, thanks also to USAID, ADB, World Bank, and some others, we have been developing the gender, mainstreaming policy internally. We have also set up our anti-sexual harassment policy. And now we are working on the SOP and the operating rules internally, and also with the help of some the multilaterals. And in terms of the organizations, in terms of the institutions, we also developed last year, we set up new divisions, so we call it the Energy Transitions and Sustainability Divisions. And thanks God, the leader for this division is a woman, a PhD from the Netherlands on the climate change. And I think I'm very proud of her. She's doing a great job. And this is becoming, a kind of pushing the awareness to the whole organizations. And last one is a program for Sri Kandi. Sri Kandi is a task force. It's a women's society. I chair this task force, and we have 4 streams. The character and capacity building. We have the policy and advocacy. We have a community contribution, as well as communication and publication. I bring along my team here, Bu Asti, Bu Henny, and there are 4, Bu Prima and Bu Anita, to come to this and see and hear what other countries and other companies has been doing now. So in terms of the collaborations, we have, of course, apart from ADB, we have a corporate university, and we have also instilled the program within the whole organizations. And also, I should mention about the Global Power System Transformation Consortiums. I see Sadie Cox there in the back. So we've been having quite a very good cooperations and pushing also some initiatives in terms of pushing the capacity building for the women in PLN, specific program in women in power system, women in leadership, and we're working with the John Hopkins. We're working with the institutions and sending people to Europe, and also having a webinar in power system. And most interesting, in every webinar, we need to push and make sure that minimum 1 woman takes participations in the committee and in the the speakers of the webinar. So it's a good program, not only on substance, but also showing that the women leadership in the power system is also being pushed in the whole organization. So we have various program with this Sri Kandi, and thanks also to the Zoom, so we can manage a very good program in a very short term. So in terms of PLN, I think PLN now we have 50,000 employees, and 19% is of women. And now it's 15%, about 15% is on the senior management or managerial leadership position. So it's good for us, but we still need to do more. And I think just 1, 2 slides, examples on the gender. We have every single project now with regards to this DLI, disbursement indicators, and some of the intention from us, because we want to improve our ESG scoring by Sustainalytics. Currently, we have a high score with this score of 38.1. We would like to get this to intermediate score by 2024, and this needs to be embedded into the operational daily operations in the projects and also in the activities of the organizations. This is one example on one of the projects funded by the World Bank. We have the need to look into the risks and potential impacts related to the gender, and we have also gender action plan and the mitigation for that. So this is very good examples, and we've been doing this with the assistance of the World Bank on this. So I think last slide, I would say probably, okay, just thank you. Time is up. But I think one last point is that we cannot do the just transition without any support from everyone. We understand the framework, but we need to do as early as possible the intervention to this, not only in creating awareness, but also creating the framework and how to do it and building the capability to do this. Myself as a CFO, as well as the chairperson for the Sri Kandi, I would push this and very open to any collaborations towards this. There is no way to do this without the support from everyone here. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
What a terrific panel. And I acquired a pair of eyeglasses as well. It's great. I did have to make a correction because when I first introduced Cynthia, I said that she was an executive vice president. That's not correct. She is financial director of PLN, of course. So my apologies for that. I know that we're out of time and we have a threat of an earthquake, but I was hoping that it might be okay if we did maybe one question. Would people like to stay on for another 5 minutes so we can do a round? Does that sound good? Yeah. So if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to just go down the row and ask everyone this question. If there was one thing above all else that the international financial community could do to help accelerate the participation of women in the transitioning energy sector in Southeast Asia, what would it be? And can I start with you, Khadija? I love putting you on the spot.
Okay, thank you for putting me on the spot. But I think we are really, doing our best, but we cannot do it alone. So we need to bring in more private sector players along with us, right? So if there is one thing we can do is maybe convince our clients that they need to accelerate that, the gender transition, bringing more women on their leadership. Like you have mentioned at the beginning, when the US adopted the 50-50 to lend to women entrepreneurs. So, a lot of those companies, if they can commit to that, and let's make it a reality quickly, because more women on the leadership means more women hire, like Booth Cynthia is doing.
Fantastic. I love it. Thank you. Kate, would you like?
Okay, so I think we talk about this transition to net zero, transitioning whole economies, transitioning whole societies, but that actually means we have an opportunity to also make other changes that we want to make, and we want to improve gender equality. So if we integrate that into our planning from the beginning and see this as an opportunity to also promote women, then we can achieve multiple objectives through the transition.
Very nice answer. I think we should clap at that. Thank you. Ibu, Cynthia?
Yeah, thank you. I would say two. One is on the policy side. I would suggest that we have a kind of, we have this sustainable financing already, sustainable financing in terms of in the financial industry, for example, but we haven't had any gender mainstreaming kind of directives of principles. It probably can be done, pushed through ASEAN for example, because ASEAN has just developed the ASEAN taxonomy for transition financing, but possibly the gender mainstreaming principles or directives from other ASEAN countries is a good one. And second is on the operational level, working with the right parties, the most relevant parties is very important. So PLN, I would say, is the right and relevant parties on this, and we are ready to work directly on showing how the just transitions would be materialized.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
As for Citron, I think we are the smallest company in this panel and probably in the ASEP event. So I think the only thing that I would need from the audience and supporter would be help building awareness of a company for our women-led entrepreneur from Thailand. I'm not an engineer, I'm the finance base, but then I'll be able to lead the pack of the team, which is 80% of men. It's going to be 100 people by the end of the year. And I really need help in supporting on this matter. Either it's going to be from financing front or building the professional relationship to support the women-led team, or the training program that could be offered or exchanged throughout the industry. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks.
I'm struggling. I have two. So one, I think today we've heard, and over the past few days, we've heard a lot of very amazing examples of both kind of programmatic or project level approaches, what's done on the company level, but also some examples of national policies, like the national policy in Nepal. Our vision with the knowledge product that I've mentioned on the Women Climate Leadership Framework is a framework to really systematically apply it to an analysis in a specific country to see what's already happening, and then what could be specific additional entry points. But don't look at it ad hoc, but rather across both the private sector and the state and the civil society, and have that approach as part of the JETP discussions. So that's one part of the answer. The second part of the answer, we talked a lot about finance, climate finance funds. We provide finance to MDBs. MDBs will be providing funds to PLN. IFC will be hopefully providing some finance to Citron, but it's still all in kind of really high level. One of the things that is really missing in the development finance architecture is the money that goes directly to the communities. And this is what we want to find ways to pilot that through Walcott, really supporting those communities. And sometimes it's really small amount of money that can go very far, and empowering them to become entrepreneurs, to grow, but also to provide public goods and serve their communities. So getting more finance down to the ground level is the second most important one. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Just to ask everyone to please thank our panel so much for their insights and their work and their delivery. Thank you so much. And I'd just like to end with one statement, is that I believe that we should have a CFR instead of an HR, and it should be a clean finance resolution of 50-50 by 2030. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your participation, for being here. Thank you.